Our first discussion today is on the Electoral Act, the amended Electoral Act, which is yet to be assented to. Now, the amended Electoral Act, Section 84, subsection 8, is awaiting the presidential assent. The act, if signed into law, will allow the statutory delegates to take part in the public parties, in the political parties, congresses, and conventions. The current version, which was assented to by President Muhammadu Buhari in February, prevented statutory delegates from taking part in party primaries. While changing rules in the middle of a game, let's hear from the civil society organization. We're being joined in the studio by the Executive Director, Resource Center for Human Rights and Civil Education, Dr. Ibrahim Zikrulahi. I hope I got your name right. Zikrulahi. You're welcome to the studio this morning. And he's not alone. Also with us in the studio is the Programs Manager, Elections, Yaga Africa, Mr. Paul James.
Thank you very much.
Mr. James, you're welcome to the show this morning. Yeah. All right, we're talking about the statutory delegates. As of today, this amended section of the Electoral Act has not been signed. And in fact, some PDP has already commenced its primaries. What is the way forward? I'm putting that to Mr. James.
Okay. Well, I think interesting times for our democracy, given what we are already seeing in the body politic, and then reflecting on all of this, my first reaction will be, I hope it is not a case for tit for tat, especially if we recall that the president had also sent his own version of amendment to amend 8412 of the Electoral Act that will have allowed political appointees also to be delegates at the primaries. And then that didn't get to see the light of the day from the two chambers of the National Assembly. And here we are again. But then also, it begs the question around due diligence, especially about our laws. If you recall that the civil society had raised some concerns when we spotted some drafting errors, whilst the National Assembly were doing the back and forth with the president over that. And the National Assembly they were angry that the civil society will go ahead of them to be making those sort of, to be coming up with those sort of issues at that point in time. Now, also, reflecting back to this process did not start now. This process started just after the 2019 elections. The process for the Electoral Act amendment, and also that led to the new act that we had. So the thing is, you got over 462 members of the National Assembly. And with all of these things, the back and forth that have been going on, like I said, this important piece of legislation, Section 84, the conversation also didn't start today. How did that escape everybody? So that's why I said it begs the question about due diligence. What have they been doing around it? And that is also why we need to start asking the fundamental question. But be that as it may, the bone of contention is about 82.8. And then if you read the law clearly, it says the party should, if the party opt to go for indirect primaries, the party can then decide how, based on their constitution, how they want to go about that. So I think it's a matter of interpretation. And that's just, everybody is trying to avoid the confusion of what the fallout of this at the end of the primaries, and that is why they're trying to be careful. PDP on its own has said, go ahead with what we currently have and what we know, using our elected delegates of 3 in every local government and also 6 from the FCT. And so this is where the challenge is. Everybody is running away from interpretation. And so the shortest route for them is to go back to the president and say, amend this, and then let us have this idea of statutory delegate. Other people have said, can we go back to INEC if INEC can provide interpretation? But sadly, INEC did not make the law. The National Assembly made the law. So I guess for me, I would say they shoot themselves in the foot, especially around how they rushed the whole process of just getting this thing out of the way.
Okay. All right, let me throw this to Dr. Ibrahim. I mean, we talk about this Section 84, and it appears to be one of the most controversial section in the newly amended Electoral Act. Aside the subsection 8, we're also talking about subsection 12 as well, which is also a subject of litigation right now. The federal government has, approached the Supreme Court for interpretation as regards that. But while we are doing all of that, INEC has a timeline it is working with, which is June 3rd. It is expecting that political parties will have, made their nominations before then. So looking at the time that we have between now and that time, and the controversies hanging over, this particular provision, how worried are you about the likely implications of, not having these laws cleared out before the end of the primaries?
Well, I must tell you that I'm not worried at all, because the politicians, they know how to eat their cake and have it. And when we talk about the law itself, the law were never made in the best interest of the people. It is about their selfish interests. So for every law that is made by this current assembly, go and read it between the lines. You will find their selfish interests embedded on it.
Yeah, but if you say that, it will sound like unfair.
Wait, let me land. Therefore, when they were making the law, the process and the rest, they were rushing it because they feel their interests have been sufficiently ingrained in the law. It was afterthought when the law was now signed that they now find that they have shot themselves on the foot, and then they had to go back. And if you observe, there are so many bills pending before the National Assembly. Some bills have taken up to almost 4 years in the National Assembly. So look, it did not take them, it just take them within few days to reconvene and say, come, we need to, so they had an emergency session, and then before you know, they have amended that section. And it is this country that you see that lawmaking is almost every day you keep amending one section and the other, whether in the Constitution or whatever. It's a big business anyway. So for me, they are politicians. They know what they are doing. Even INEC, they have not, maybe the president have not taken sufficient interest about what is going on. By the time he show interest, he buy into their lobby or whatever, I'm sure INEC can be coerced to change the date.
Dr. Ibrahim.
So for me,
well, if
Dr.
you say
Ibrahim,
coerce,
there's a
there
concern.
are constitutional provisions
Exactly.
for all of this.
Dr. Ibrahim,
if we are following constitutionally what the Constitution says, we will be having all these crises.
Dr. Ibrahim, there are concerns that, if the statutory delegates were to vote, we're going to, between APC and the PDP, they'll have about 11,500 delegates. Now, if the statutory delegates are not going to vote, in fact, in total, it's not going to be up to 3,000, thereabout. And already, some people are raising concerns that is too few a number to elect candidates that will, because it is whoever these people elect that Nigerians have to choose from.
Look, we are talking as if we are running a genuine democracy where the people matters. We have a situation whereby we said, okay, we are going to direct primaries, whereby every member of the party we queue up and elect. They said no, we have to do consensus. We have to, even all these things we are doing, all those thousands of delegates we are talking about, 3,005 and whatever. At the end of the day, by the time few of them come together, they said this is the one we choose. It is just adoption. All those votes doesn't matter. So for me, whether it is 1 million that are going there to vote or 3,000, they are not there for the people. And so whatever comes out there does not represent the
You sound pessimistic, as though you do not believe in the system at all.
This is a system where we have worked to nurture, we have worked to build year in, year out. But what are we getting? What are we getting? Look at the characters that are parading themselves as aspirants. These are people that, one way or the other, they have cases with EFCC, ICPC. People that 15 billion naira will know what it can do in the life of our education. Suddenly, overnight, the person is now the chairman of ruling party. And they are moving, what are they telling the public? Look, all these are just to hoodwink the people. To say that, oh, election was done, it was genuine primaries or whatever. They know how they are doing their game. Let them continue with it.
Isn't there a plan to make things better?
Look, if this will be better, certainly it's not this dispensation. Certainly it's not this dispensation.
That sounds scary, Doctor.
You've written off the whole thing, you know.
Honestly speaking, I can
because
tell you,
we have at least a few more months to go.
There's nothing good that will come out of all these shenanigans they are doing about. There's nothing good.
Aren't you hopeful that anything could happen?
Even the selection of delegates and the rest, it's all awash in the news media. In the last 2 weeks, how aspirants have been buying delegates.
Yes.
In dollars and the rest.
Doctor, it's interesting you raised that.
So
Some people have also raised
that
concerns.
is happening, are you talking about, what are we talking about?
Some people have also raised concerns that the fewer the delegates, the easier it is to buy them. But that if the delegates are many, including the statutory delegates, you will not be able to buy all of them.
But we have
no matter how much you
they are not using their money now. They are using state money. They are using public money. And so they don't feel it. They don't feel it.
Anyway,
if it's their personal money, they can't do that.
Well, let me ask Paul, do you share the same concern about how delegates are drawn in our election process? And what are the faults that you think that needs to be given some more attention?
So I'm trying to be careful here not to also be drawn in the waters of the politics that is currently happening. Like Dr. Zik has rightly stated, there are other options that the political parties can explore. This whole conversation started when, in the first draft that we had, the proposition there was to do a direct primaries. Everybody went about town and was crying, no, we should think about other options. And then in addition to the other options, we saw consensus candidates. The parties have the liberty to explore any other of the options. What is currently happening is that even amongst the party themselves, no party currently can boast of having a certified register of members. If they truly have a certified register of members, every other party will have gone with the option of, oh, let's just go queue up behind our candidate and vote for our candidate. One of the conditions, one of the requirements for parties to participate in primaries is to file a list of their members to INEC. How many of these parties have done this? As of the last time I know, only one of the 18 parties have done that as we speak. So what is happening currently is all politics.
Do you think that there's a deliberate attempt to ensure that the status quo is maintained?
Beyond the conversation for the 84-12, 84-8, don't forget there is also an underlying conversation about amending section 26, 27, which is also about the timeline for the elections. They want the timeline now to be shortened from 180 days, the conclusion of the primaries, from 180 days to 150 days, just to satisfy their selfish interests. The reason why we have this now embedded in our laws is based on the lessons of the past, that if all of these pre-election issues are not resolved before you go into an election, it's going to delay the election process. What we saw in 2019, if this is not settled now, was just that what we saw in 2019 was a child play. Election was delayed by 1 week. All we know was about logistics, but beyond the logistics, there are a lot of litigations that lingered until almost close to the election. We saw that also in the Bayelsa election, for instance, in 2019, where parties keep running to the court to seek injunction to stop this, to do that. Why don't we resolve all of this now before we go into the election? That is what we're saying. As it is, there are underlying interests to alter the sequence of, to alter the timeline of our election, and we're saying no to it. There is also now the interest to begin to force the hands of INEC to do the biddings of the party. If these 3 people per local government are the ones that best represent the interests of the parties at the moment, so be it. Let us move on with this stage. PDP is already doing primaries. Yesterday they did primaries for the House of Assembly and the likes.
Senate.
And they are going into the next cycle. So what are we crying about? If this works for them.
Okay, we are seeing postponements, by political parties, for their primary elections. Do you think that perhaps INEC should consider, postponing, shifting the deadline?
INEC will not and should not consider that. Parties, it is enough that parties should be forcing our hands to do their own. As much as candidates emerge through the process, they are just lucky. Maybe the conversation we should start having about reforms in this process is to start talking about independent candidacy. We cannot continue to dance to the tunes of these current sets of political parties that we have.
But yes, INEC has said that it is not going to postpone it. But do you see them cowing under pressure? Because with these postponements happening, it appears that all these postponements we're seeing is aimed at forcing the hands of INEC.
Nigeria belongs to all of us. Will you subscribe to INEC postponing altering the current timeline as we have? Don't forget, the reasons why we keep, we all agitated or we all push for the reforms that we currently have is about giving INEC enough time to plan for our election. Based on the current Electoral Act, INEC has 360 days to plan the election. If you recall also before now, INEC had planned to have the 2023 election on the 18th of February. But because the Electoral Act was signed on the 25th, the process for INEC started counting from the 25th of primaries of February, and so they are going to have the presidential primaries on the 25th of February in 2023. Any alteration to this timeline will have a very devastating effect on other activities that INEC are supposed to do. Party primary is not just the only thing that INEC is supposed to do. Don't forget, we are currently also going through voter registration. This process will end. INEC will need to clean up the register and present it to these primaries, to these political parties. Beyond all of this, after they had finished the processes, they are supposed to submit the nominated candidates to INEC. INEC is supposed to also make this public for possible scrutiny by the public. So I don't think we should alter any of this sequence as it is.
Okay, but the Electoral Act as amended has not been signed, and the PDP has started its primary.
Which of the Electoral Act are we
this
talking
section
about?
of the statutory delegates, that's the section I'm talking about.
Okay.
Now, that part has not been signed as at this minute, and the PDP has started its primaries. If it were to be signed tomorrow or later today, the PDP would have lost part of...
Exactly the point I'm making, and we cannot say should apply in retrospect. So why don't we just move forward? We already have an electoral act that is serving the purpose of the election. All we are trying to talk about now is to infuse the interest of political parties. I agree, the more the better, the more the merrier, especially if we are talking about inclusive democratic process. But as it is, we are also racing against the time to have the credible election that Nigerians want. It is working for Party A already. Are we trying to serve the interests of Party B? Is that what we are talking here? Why don't we move on from this?
Let me just add that, just a way of clarification, when I said INEC can be coerced to change the date. You see, the ruling government today is APC. The National Assembly is dominated by APC. And the controversy we are talking about is between the executive and the legislature on the amended act. Now, the way they rush to amend that section, I won't be surprised that if president sign into law today, they can reconvene today overnight and change the time of this thing. And the INEC have no option than to now comply. Because this is a system whereby it's almost everything goes.
All right, now if, for instance, we are hearing speculations about certain political parties, allowing these statutory delegates to participate in the party primaries. If such political parties move ahead to do this, even without the presidential assent to that section of the Constitution? What are the likely implications of that in the whole process, if I may, Doctor?
Well, he has rightly put it. Party B has already done their own primaries. Others have done. No PRP and the rest. This weekend, they are also doing their own. So I don't see the reason why we have to change the goalposts because of Party A. So if the president has not signed into law, and the president is not deaf, he's hearing everything that is going on in the public. He has numerous advisors. So if he want to sign it, he would have signed it. So he should just tell the public he's not signing it, instead of keeping people in the dark. He has the power to reject it. So if the assembly want to veto, let them go ahead and do that. But what we are saying now is that the one that is already being implemented, we should just stick to it and discard the one that is not signed.
Okay, all right. Now let's look at this other section, subsection 12 of that same section 84, which is now in the Supreme Court level, about political appointees voting or not voting, and all of that. And then again, within the timeline that we have left, what are your thoughts about what is likely to happen if the court gives its ruling, either in favor or against?
Well, if the court gives its ruling and we're already in the election, I don't see us stopping the whole election because the court gave its ruling. I'm sure the court will also act in the interests of Nigeria and also the sustainability of our current democracy. But then the point also to make here is the fact that my gut feeling tells me the president will not sign this, given also the antecedent that, if you recall, in 2018, 2019, the president 4 times refused to sign the amended Electoral Act. And one of his points was that it was too close to the election and could cause confusion. Already a process has started. The PDP had gone ahead to do with the current delegates that they have. Signing anything within this time frame that we have would cause confusion in the body politic. So I don't feel or I don't see the president signing it.
Do you truly believe that if the president does not assent to this bill, that would be the reason? Because it's too close to the election?
That's what I said. That's my gut feeling, that it might, based on the antecedent of what happened in the past, it might cause confusion. But I don't speak for the president. I'm not any of the advisors. So, but I think we should let things the way they are. Whatever is happening, like I said, is purely political. If the president signs this thing into law today, it gives power back to the National Assembly to do the way they want to do about the delegates and also about those primaries. As it stands, I think the feeling is that the power is now with the governors, because it's just purely fight between the governors and the National Assembly. And we should not be, for me, I don't think we should not be enmeshed in what is happening and just look at it. For me, look at it from a very unbiased angle, and then if it is just about the continuity of the process, I think it should just go the way it is.
Okay, now this morning we are seeing on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper how the PDP is, postponing primary elections in the southeastern part of the country on the account of, the sit-at-home order and all of that. Do you see the agitations and the tension in the southeast as a threat to, the electoral process?
So that's not just the only problem. I think we should also state it the way it is. In some of the states, the problem is that you're having parallel primaries.
Yes.
You're also having different factions of the PDP. So those are the internal issues that I think will be resolved. For the sit-at-home and all of that, with all of those crises that have happened in the past, elections still happen in those regions. What this is doing to our election is, and I fear if it continues, is affecting participation. What we are beginning to see is weaponization of violence now in the election. If you follow through, like 3, 4, 5 elections that had happened in recent past. Go to Edo in 2020. 18 local governments, 12 of the 18 were riddled with all forms of pre-election related violence. Go to, an election happened. Go to Ondo in 2020, 13 of 18 local government, the same concern. Anambra, as we know also in last year, it was almost like election was not going to happen. Participation was just under 10%. So the concern is that the people now that will be voting in the elected people now, I mean, I don't think they best serve the interests of the generality of the people if it continues like this. It's going to affect participation, and the actors, especially the security agencies, need to just be on alert, take up the responsibility of protecting life and property, and also see how they can help to build confidence and improve participation in the process.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Zeke, what will you be saying to parties that have been pushing for this postponement, that want INEC to shift its deadlines?
Well, I think I'm sorry to say, like I keep mentioning, they are not saying that because of the people they want to represent or they aspire to lead. Because if a timeline has been set for a game, I think it beholds that every genuine politician should abide by that timeline. So you can't say you should shift this, you have to shift that too. So that is why even INEC, to some extent, is losing respect because of the way they have been tossing INEC here and there. They have a serious project at hand. Don't forget that next month they will be in Ekiti and Osun. Yeah. And that is a huge task already before INEC. And it is because of the behavior of politicians and the rest that we are having those staggered elections today. And it is the same attitude they have carried from one election to the other. Now postponing the election for whose interests? I will rather urge INEC to stick to their decision.
Isn't it even curious that despite that, isn't it even curious that after 4 years, some parties are saying they're not ready?
It's not even 4 years. Because the election has been a big problem in this country. Right from, let me say, from 2003 to 1999, which was conducted by the military, was reasonably, let me say, to some extent, fair, and because of the history of that election. After a long military stretch, and we are now going to transition, there was that enthusiasm to have civilians to take the stage. And so everybody was ready, welcomed the transition. But from 2003, we saw what has been happening. If about 20 years thereafter, 22 years, we have not been able to put our house in order, to have a stable and just electoral act that everybody can easily embrace. Everyone that is in power want to change it to his own favor. And that is exactly the crisis we are having. And so for me, I think the politicians should just allow peace to reign in this country. We have had enough of tension. We have had enough of crisis.
All right. Okay, well, we'll take a short breather, and then when we come back, we'll continue with our discussion on the program. Please stay with us.
All right, welcome back. And if you're just joining us, we're still talking about the amended Electoral Act, Section 84, subsection 8, which is still awaiting the presidential assent. If this section is not signed by the president, all the statutory delegates will not be able to take part in the primaries, which has started and is still ongoing. So, Dr. Zik, we're still talking about the amended act before we went on break. But now we're going to talk about the electoral materials itself, which we're going to use for the elections. Before now, the CBN governor indicated interest in contesting for the elections. The CBN is also going to be housing these electoral materials that we'll be using for the elections. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think before we even go into the CBN warehousing the electoral material, let's first of all look at the Emefiele as an aspirant in the election. I think they say the president, let me not say they capitalize on his weakness. I think they see the president as somebody that has that I don't care attitude towards national matters. That's why it becomes free for all. And it's unfortunate that anybody that is aspiring to contest for one position or the other, don't try to examine himself. Emefiele was appointed by Goodluck Jonathan way back after the removal of Lamido as governor of CBN. From the time he came in to now, personally am to rate Emefiele as a candidate, what was the value of Naira as at the time he took over as governor of CBN and now? As at last week, Naira was exchanging over 600 Naira to $1.
So the argument will be, well, this is as a result of forces beyond the control of the CBN.
Wait, I'm just trying to situate his interest in the election that will make him acceptable to the people, that will make him to even jettison the office of governor of central bank to now say he's throwing his hat in the ring. So, but I also feel that there are forces behind all that we are seeing, because this is a country, the more you look, the less you see. So if the cabal, let me use the words of some radicals now, the cabal in Aso Rock are not behind that his effort, I'm sure by now the president would have shown him the way out. So he has tested the water, because he even took the president so much time until the civil society came together to brace the president before the president now give an order to a marching order to the ministers and the CBN governor to resign if they so want. And so now he's withdrawing from the race. He has already bought form, 100 million Naira. His name is in the ballot of APC. I don't know if they have removed it now. There are a number of questions that need to be asked.
Yes. So I would like for Paul to also comment on that. What are your concerns as regards that? Do you see any implication of having him as CBN governor even in this coming elections?
So I think I'll start this way. There is this popular saying in this country that we joke too much. And I think for me, the incursion of Emefiele into our politics is a joke taken too far, especially because if the man truly understands what integrity is about, he shouldn't even have been seen dancing around the corridors of the kind of politics that we play in this country. But one of the sense I also got from all that was happening was that for the party at that point in time, it's about how they can amass the kind of money that they got from the source of funds. So it was more for me like a money laundering or trying to wash dirty money, and then Emefiele fell into that politics, and also the party got what they wanted at that point in time. Now I think the party had got what it wanted. Emefiele has served his own purpose. So I will just wait to see what will happen in the coming days. I don't feel like he's going to be there until the election, because the people involved, the people concerned also know the implication of this. Trust has been a very expensive commodity in our election. We cannot afford to have characters like Emefiele around our election. Now, the point is also that these materials, it's not like they are currently housed at the CBN. We should be very clear about it. But the materials will be housed, the sensitive materials will be housed in the CBN close to the elections. The materials are produced outside of the country. When they are brought into the country close to the election, they are housed at the CBN. But now there is a credibility question there. Can we trust anything that goes into the CBN with characters like Emefiele in the CBN? I sincerely feel like he will be thrown out of the door before the election. I hope the president and people that are advising him do what is right by the people before the election. But we cannot have somebody like Emefiele around our election.
Okay, so you know, this is a person who is serving a tenure, right? Part of his argument has been that, well, he is not a political appointee; he's a public servant, you know, and all that. So, how do you respond to that? Is there a legal grounds to dismiss him from his office?
Well, but what has happened now is clear that a politician is now at the saddle of CBN. Whether he's still contesting or not, because he has taken membership of the party. Because if you are not a member of the party, you cannot buy their form. So it is clear that an APC member is the governor of CBN today. And so the other party should show genuine concern about what happened to electoral material, not just INEC. Because if we are contesting the same election and one party is more or less housing the material, then there is a danger in that. And that is why I feel that what Paul has just said is the genuine thing to do, if the right thing to do, if we must move forward. The president should do the needful. I don't see the intelligence of Emefiele, the integrity of Emefiele, what Emefiele is doing there, that if Emefiele should leave CBN, Nigeria will collapse. We have even seen the economy, we have seen everything. I don't see the value is adding to his office. And I think the president should, because he always wait for people to shout before he act. So I'm shouting now that the president should please kick out Emefiele from CBN as governor.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's a place to end the show for today. We do appreciate you coming on Daybreak this morning and joining us to share your perspectives.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.